My name is Adolf Hitler, and by the time you hear these words, I will already be dead. The world will remember me as a monster. History books will be filled with my name, not with pride, but with horror. But I was not born a monster. I was born a child. A small, fragile child in a quiet town with a mother who loved me and a father who never understood me. This is my story, not to earn your sympathy, not to justify what I became, but so you may understand how darkness grows inside a human soul, one wound at a time. Within months, I dismantled everything. The parliament, the constitution, the free press, political parties, trade unions, all of it, gone. A fire at the Reichstag building gave me the excuse I needed. Emergency powers, the Enabling Act, and just like that, democracy in Germany was dead. I did not seize power in the shadows. I did it in broad daylight, and the people cheered. I became the Führer, the absolute leader. Every soldier, every official, every citizen swore loyalty, not to Germany, not to a constitution, but to me, personally. I built highways. I built factories. I eliminated unemployment. Germans who had been starving just years before now had jobs, food, pride. They did not ask too many questions about where it was all heading. But there was a shadow behind all of it. And that shadow fell heaviest on the Jews. First, I banned them from public service, then from schools, then from businesses. The Nuremberg laws stripped them of citizenship. They were no longer German. They were no longer even human, not in the eyes of my laws. In November 1938, my forces unleashed Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Synagogues burned, shops destroyed, thousands arrested. And the world watched, and did very little. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. On the world stage, I moved with the same ruthlessness. I took back the Rhineland. I swallowed Austria. I demanded Czechoslovakia, and Britain and France, desperate to avoid war, handed it to me at Munich. Their prime minister flew home and declared peace for our time. Peace, what a word. I had no interest in peace. I had interest in empire. On September the 1st, 1939, my armies crossed into Poland. The world held its breath. Britain and France declared war, and so it began, the greatest war in human history. And I was at its center. Poland fell in weeks, then Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, and then France. The nation that had humiliated Germany in 1918 fell in just 6 weeks. I stood at the Eiffel Tower and felt like a god. Britain refused to surrender. That small island, led by a stubborn man named Churchill, defied me. My air force bombed their cities night after night. But they did not break. It should have been a warning. I did not listen. In June 1941, I made the decision that would define everything. I invaded the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. Nearly 4 million soldiers. The largest invasion in history. At first, victory after victory, my armies swept across the Russian plains like a storm, millions of Soviet soldiers captured. It seemed as though nothing could stop me, but Russia is vast, and winter is merciless. What I am about to tell you is the part of my story that the world will never forgive, and should never forgive. It began with words, propaganda, blame, dehumanization. I called them parasites. I called them a disease. And when you call human beings a disease long enough, people begin to accept the cure. First, the ghettos. Jews across Eastern Europe were herded into walled sections of cities: Warsaw, Łódź, Krakow. Families of 10 in a single room. Starvation, disease, death in the streets. Then, the killing squads, the Einsatzgruppen. They followed my armies into the Soviet Union and shot men, women, and children. Entire communities erased in a single afternoon. At Babi Yar, near Kiev, over 33,000 Jews were shot in just 2 days, leaned up at the edge of a ravine, and murdered. Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec. Names that will echo through eternity as monuments to human evil, industrial killing. Gas chambers designed to murder thousands per day. Bodies burned in ovens. Gold pulled from the teeth of the dead. Hair shaved and collected. Every last possession stolen. 6 million Jews murdered. Not in the chaos of battle, but in the cold, calculated machinery of genocide. Men, women, children, babies, and millions more, Roma, disabled, political prisoners, prisoners of war, homosexuals, all consumed by the same machine. I set this in motion. My words, my orders, my ideology. The blood of millions is on my hands, and no passage of time will ever wash it away. This is not a confession. I did not feel guilt then. That is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all, that a human being can do such things and feel nothing. Stalingrad. That name still burns. I sent 300,000 men into that city. I ordered them to hold it at any cost. I refused retreat. I refused surrender. And the Soviets surrounded them, starved them, and destroyed them. 90,000 survived to become prisoners. Most never came home. After Stalingrad, the tide turned. And it never turned back. The Soviets pushed westward. The Americans and British invaded Italy, then France. D-Day, June 6, 1944, a wall of soldiers crashed onto the beaches of Normandy. My fortress Europe was breached. My own generals tried to kill me. On July 20, 1944, a bomb exploded at my headquarters. I survived. Barely. My ears rang. My uniform was torn. But I was alive. I executed the conspirators. I purged anyone I suspected of disloyalty. Trust became impossible. I saw enemies everywhere. By early 1945, my body was failing. My hands trembled. My back was bent. I was pale, exhausted, pumped full of medications by a doctor whose competence I should have questioned long ago. But worse than my body was my mind. I stood over maps in my bunker, moving armies that no longer existed, issuing orders to divisions that had already been destroyed. My generals would look at me, and I could see it in their eyes. They knew it was over. I refused to accept it. The Soviets reached Berlin in April. The sound of artillery shook the walls of my bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling with every explosion. The greatest city of my empire was being reduced to rubble above my head. In those final days underground, the world shrank to a few concrete rooms. Dim lights, stale air, the distant thunder of Russian shells. The people who remained with me were shadows, hollow eyes, broken spirits. We all knew how this would end. I learned that Himmler, faithful Himmler, had tried to negotiate surrender behind my back, and Göring, that bloated fool, had tried to seize power. Betrayal. Even now, at the very end, betrayal. I thought of Mussolini, captured by partisans, shot. His body hung upside down in a public square for the crowd to spit on. I swore that would never happen to me. The enemy would never have my body. On April 28th, I did something I had never done. I married Eva Braun, the woman who had stood by me for 16 years, hidden from the world. She chose to stay when everyone else fled. She chose to die with me. I dictated my final testament. Even in my last words, I blamed the Jews. Even at the end, I could not see what I had become. The hatred was so deep, so woven into my being, that it was indistinguishable from who I was. On April 30th, 1945, at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, I sat in my private room in the bunker. Eva was beside me. Above us, Berlin burned. The empire I had built was dust. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted 12 years. Eva took a cyanide capsule. I raised a pistol to my head.